Life is filled with experiences that we relate to one another through story. These stories often shape our understanding of time and place. Our own personal stories set us apart as individuals, yet at the same time remind us that we're all alike in some way. The elderly, the people that came before us, these are the men and women who opened doors to the world we live in today. They too were young once, dreamed, hoped, perhaps despaired. By listening to their stories, we learn about the past, and we learn about ourselves.
When we get together with the seniors, especially for games night, it was really good. A lot of talking went on, and playing just casual card games, and just finding out how comfortable they are with teenagers and how comfortable we can be with them. It was just good to sit down and play games with them and just tell jokes back and forth. And with bowling, it was especially good. To see them come out and want to share time with us and be so interested in helping us out with our projects. Alright, I signed up for Wish We Could Talk based on the fact that I like to make movies and wanted to experience making a documentary, and I've always been interested in the elderly folk because they seem to always have stories to tell. Like my grandfather always tells me stories, so I just wanted to find more out about them and learn more who they are and what they have to tell.
Learned a lot of stuff about the seniors and much information that's pretty interesting. I mean, I've been learning a lot about the past that I may not have known, so it's quite intriguing to me. It's fun, but not just fun, but enjoyable, and it's a learning experience for me every day when I'm with the seniors, you know?
Just a good representation of a nice, good old an old person that has had stories. They've all had them, so just a good representation of what they are, representation of who they are.
When you look at the seniors, they look like a really interesting, lively bunch of people, you know. But I don't think a lot of people spend the time to look at them and try to see they're labeled as seniors, the label they have as seniors. But they're so much more. I mean, they're just so exciting. I mean, if you try I want people to see that they're so alive and they're so full of stuff, information and stuff, and they're such great people. I mean.
Expected to learn just how they grew up, where they grew up, what life was like, just kind of where they lived.
Well, my dad was a lightkeeper, and being grown the only family on the island, you've learned very early to get along with your own family, because if you fought with your sister or your brother, then you had nobody to play with. And this very early taught me how to get along with people and how to blend in and make do. Coming from school, you never got home till it was just about supper time, because it was 3.5 mile walk from the school to the point where my dad would meet us with a boat and row 3/4 of a mile, and then walk another ½ mile to the lighthouse. So it was pretty near supper time by the time you got there.
It was a rural area. We went to school in the winter with a closed-in van pulled by horses, you see.
After you got out of school, because they had the French school just up the street from us. And it was just like us. Just to fight to get home and fight to come back. Same as them.
When I was old enough to go to school, the school was closed in our community because there weren't enough children to go. So we had to move in order to start the school. And then it was a one-room school with all the grades.
Well, we had brothers, and they were awful strict.
Our schooling, of course, was a bit different on the island because storms come up along the tail in October, November. The water would get so rough that you couldn't go across, so you couldn't go to school.
You always had to be there for 9 o'clock. Girls lined up at one door and the boys lined up in another door. The teacher rang the bell and you ran and got in your lineup. Then you marched into school and you marched to your classroom. And you were in there and you sat down. The only time you stood up was when you were spoken to, or if another teacher came into the door, the whole class would stand up, because that was out of respect to the teacher. There was always teachers on the school grounds, and they broke up any fights, and you got to strap when you got indoors, inside the school. And we used to say the teacher put pepper on the strap, because when you finished getting the strap, you had these little black bits on your hand, but I think now that I think of it, I think it was just bits of leather.
I don't recall fights in school. I suppose there was some, but no, it just wasn't the thing to do. You know, you'd be sent home and you'd have a worse problem when your mother found out what you were doing wrong. If you got punished in school, you were going to get punished when you got home too. A school day, you walked to school, which was 3.5 miles to school.
There wasn't as much to do when we were younger, so you spend more time reading, writing, and handcrafting.
And when I was young, I'd sit up on the top step in the evening when they had a big sing-along, a bunch of people come in and have a big sing-along, and I'd sit there and I'd love it. And then, of course, I took singing, and I guess I got my talent from that, from Mom and Dad.
It was very easygoing. I come from a big family, so we had, vacation time was time to be with each other. We didn't have a lot of friends outside the family. Camped a lot in the summer. I think it was probably a good idea since my mother had to get rid of us somewhere. But my uncle had a bungalow and we were allotted time, each of us. We enjoyed that very much. And we had a parish camp too, which was very nice. We were allowed to spend 2 weeks there. So it was pretty easy going. We were very close to the ocean, but we swam at a lake, and it was, I would say it was probably 10 miles. And we walked there, walked back. So, but, you know, we didn't know any better, and we wanted to have a good time, so that's what we did.
Go out and play games called Kick the Can and Hide and Seek and Red Rover saying so-and-so over. One of my favorite things was roller skating. We used to roller skate everywhere. Go quite far. They weren't like the roller skates you got today. They buckled onto your shoe. And they weren't in line. There were 4 wheels on them. We had outdoor rinks, and we did our ice skating outdoors.
Playing baseball, or in the wintertime we'd play hockey, street hockey, with a piece of coal. Yeah, no pucks. Piece of coal. We used to put 2 rocks on each side for the goalpost. We used to play on the road, and you heard that expression on TV, car, and that's what we used to say when. Say, watch it, the car coming. We'd get out.
We skated. We had with the winters there. We had plenty of snow and skating and this sort of thing, but we never had enough for a hockey team or a baseball team.
The time you had to be in, evening times, and there would be chores that were always sort of on the regular list, and everybody would have to take their turn in doing it. And of course, no young people enjoyed that.
You had to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, have your breakfast, do your chores, and at 7:30 you took the rowboat Dory, rowed across to the other side 3/4 of a mile, and you walked 3.5 miles to school. After you did certain chores and homework, there was time for about a 15 or 20-minute radio program, and there was time for bed.
The plumbing was outdoor plumbing, and of course we had the outhouses, and the water, we carried the water in buckets.
We didn't have the same facilities for filling in your time after routine of school and home. There was always a routine in the house that you had certain jobs to do. And the food, of course, you weren't allowed any fussiness over food. You ate what was on the table, or you went without.
She'd send someone to the store to buy a loaf of bread. We thought we died and went to heaven because we had store bread. We learned quickly that her bread was better than the store bread.
Well, they sometimes figure that maybe it was a little bit too harsh or a little bit too strict sometimes in the punishment, but none of us ever suffered from it. I mean...
I don't remember if ever getting beaten for anything I did. They mostly just talked to us, told us right from wrong.
Dad being an old army man, everything had to be done as the book, by the book, right on time. You were never late, and if you were late coming home from school to meet him to take you home to the island, you knew about it.
You didn't disagree with your parents in those days. What they said was the law, and you did it, and if you didn't, you suffered the consequences.
You hear the story of spare the rod and spoil the child. The rod was not spared.
You were very careful. My father only hit me once in my lifetime because he wasn't happy with the way I answered my mother when she asked me a question. So I knew that I wasn't getting away with anything. And she didn't discipline us. We didn't need to. There was too many of us. You know, you had to... if we went wild, I don't know what she would have done. Probably killed us because there were so many of us.
We learned to respect your parents, and there was never anybody ever spoke back. You might not agree with it, but that's the way it was. And in a way, see, this was Dad's army training. You say jump, you say how high, and away you go. Well, and living on an island, you had somewhat to be organized the same way.
Dad and I were quite close because Dad was a beautiful singer and Mom played the piano, and we always had sing-alongs in the house. That's one thing we did have. I can remember that so well.
So we used to go out nearly, it was a close family, we used to go out nearly every weekend. There was 7 of us, 7 kids, and my mom and dad, it was 9. And we used to go out after we all got older. The whole gang of us used to go out on the weekend. We used to go camping and do something with their wives and husbands. And we used to have a lot of fun, which you don't see today, family circles like that.
You know, you stayed with your parents until you got married pretty well. Girls didn't go out and get their own apartments in those days. Neither did the boys.
The thing I can remember most was when war was declared in 1939. He moved all the animals and all the rest of the family off the island. He and I kept the light. But we went for the mail every day. And he was looking for this big brown envelope for his call back into the Army for regular service. And one day he came out with the paper in his hand and away he went. The older brother was old enough to get in the Air Force, and in 1943 he left, and I was then the man of the farm at the ripe age of 13.
Had a record player, and the dances were usually waltzes, foxtrots, slow ones, and Of course, there was jiving in those days too, but
I love to dance, so I always started dancing when I was about 17, going to dances. I enjoyed that so much.
And then you could go out Friday even, yeah, went out to a dance. It was a sock hop or a dance, it didn't matter, as long as it was a dance.
Within 2 months from the time I got out of high school, I joined the Air Force. In my 4th year in the Air Force, I got posted from Halifax to France, and the posting was to Paris. I saw all the countries this side of the Iron Curtain. They told me when I left Europe 3.5 years later that I was probably the most traveled airman in Europe.
Well, I joined at 16 because we were too young for the Army or Navy, so the Merchant Navy take you. You always think you're, you know, oh, I could do this, I could do that. And once you start sailing, it's a different world altogether. Different. You got to take responsibility.